Good evening, and welcome to this evening's edition of the Vision Root video blog. I'm your host, Richard Urban, coming to you from historic Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. Well, this is the third in our series of installments about the presidential elections, and tonight's topic is who will protect the Second Amendment, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton? And so what I'd like to do is, again, look at the issue. So what does the Second Amendment say? The Second Amendment says that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, this topic came up prominently in the third debate, and so let's look at that clip now and look at an analysis whether Mrs. Clinton was telling the truth about her opinion about the Second Amendment and about the Heller gun case in Washington, D.C. Okay, let's look at that clip now.
Hey everybody, it's Jake Tapper from CNN State of the Union and factcheck.org, and today we're going to take a look at a claim made by Democratic presidential nominee and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton about the landmark 2008 Heller U.S. Supreme Court decision about guns. Take a listen.
You mentioned the Heller decision, and what I was saying that you referenced, Chris, was that I disagreed with the way the court applied the Second Amendment in that case, because what the District of Columbia was trying to do was to protect toddlers from guns.
Is that true? Was the Heller decision about the D.C. gun law, was that mainly about trying to protect toddlers from guns? No, that is not true. The core issue at stake in the Supreme Court's Heller decision was that Washington, D.C.'s total ban on the possession of handguns violated the Second Amendment to the Constitution, and that Second Amendment conferred on individuals a right to bear arms for self-defense. Quote, "In sum, we hold that the district's ban on handgun possession in the home violates the Second Amendment," unquote, Justice Antonin Scalia wrote for the 5-4 majority. Now, it is true that as a secondary matter in the case, the decision also struck down a D.C. requirement that any lawful firearms kept at home be disassembled or bound by a trigger lock at all times. And that could be interpreted as trying to protect toddlers. But that was not the main thrust of the law, and that was not the main thrust of the Heller decision. So what Secretary Clinton said during the third presidential debate about the Heller decision is very misleading. That's not what the thrust of the law in D.C. was about, and it's not what the thrust of the Heller decision was about. A reminder to all you politicians out there, you're perfectly entitled to your own opinions, not to your own facts. I'm Jake Tapper for CNN State of the Union and factcheck.org.
So we can see in this clip that Mrs. Clinton is very disingenuous and dishonest about her stand on the Second Amendment. First of all, she says, I was watching the debate. She says, well, 33,000 people have died. And the reason that I was upset about the Heller decision, which is the landmark decision in 2008 in Washington, D.C., which, by the way, is where I lived for 25 years. And so I know something about the violence in Washington, D.C. The reason I opposed that was because I didn't want toddlers to die from gun violence, implying that there were thousands or even 30,000 people killed from gun violence, and it implying, wow, even toddlers. And I thought, what the heck? So many people killed by gun violence, and then toddlers killed in D.C.? Well, that was not what all Heller was about. Heller was about, the decision in Heller was about the right to have a handgun in D.C., and in fact, no one could have a handgun, period. But D.C. had one of the highest, and still has one of the highest murder rates in the country, as Donald Trump pointed out during the debate. Like Chicago has an incredibly high murder rate and some of the strictest gun laws. So clearly there's a disconnect between gun ownership and whether a place is safe or not. In fact, places that where people own guns are safer. So this doesn't make any sense. Anyway, she implied that Heller was about, her opposition to Heller was about little kids having toddlers. It was a total disconnect. It wasn't at all about that. What it was about was the right of people in Washington, D.C. to have their Second Amendment rights. And also implying that 33,000 people die from gun violence, you think, oh, that's accidental deaths. No, not at all. Actually, the actual number of people who died in 2015 for accidental deaths from guns was 505. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a lot of people, but that's a lot different than 33,000. 11,208 of those were homicides. Well, many of them, if not the great majority, were committed with guns that weren't even legally purchased. There was 21,000 suicides. So anyway, she's just bandies about these statistics, misleading people. Oh, I opposed the DC law because it was about toddlers getting shot. By the way, I couldn't there was, I think, maybe 1 or 2 cases in DC where there's an accidental shooting with children. And of course, if people have a gun in the home, they should keep it secured properly and not let children have it in their hands. But it was a total twisting of the situation by Mrs. Clinton. The fact is that she is in favor of restricting the access to guns, even though she says that she supports the Second Amendment. In reality, she was upset about the Heller decision in DC, which is a place where people couldn't even own a gun, period. So basically, she's against people being able to own guns. And she twists the things around to make it sound like the main problem is that people have guns, where the problem is that, of course, criminals have guns who aren't supposed to have guns. So we're not even enforcing the existing laws. As Mr. Trump has mentioned, he would be in favor of programs such as Exile, which was a successful program in Richmond, where people who had guns illegally would get 5 years in prison, and that worked. Whereas in DC, people who are convicted or even of having a gun in their possession, there's no penalty. They're back out on the streets. So it's not even the laws we have are not even enforced. So Congress saw fit that people would be able to defend themselves, and that the United States would have a militia so it could be secure. And that's an important, not next to the freedom of speech, that's the Second Amendment. So Mrs. Clinton, in spite of saying she believes in the Second Amendment, by her actions and her dubious, how do you want to say, contentions, like during the debate and throwing around statistics falsely, you can see that clearly she is not in favor of the Second Amendment rights of people to own firearms, because she didn't even support the Heller decision in DC, where people could not even own a firearm, how do you say, a handgun at all, period. And even until then, couldn't even easily have any kind of gun, on their in their property. So I think this tells a lot about whether Mrs. Clinton is being truthful about her assertion that she really does support the Second Amendment. And that's a very, very important right. I mean, after all, the right of people to bear arms was responsible for the founding of our nation. So we've had a militia for a very, very long time. And to say that people can't bear arms for self-defense or even for the defense of the nation, I know we do have a national military, but still, we call up like the National Guard, civilian military. Some places like in Switzerland, everyone is in the militia, so they have weapons. It's not unusual, it's a normal thing. So, and by the way, Switzerland has a lot lower homicide rate than the United States. So is Mrs. Clinton friendly to the Second Amendment? Absolutely not. And she twists the facts and tries to make people think she respects the Second Amendment, when it clearly, it's doing things like saying, oh, I oppose Heller because toddlers were being shot in DC. Well, in DC, people weren't even able to have a gun in the home, period. So that is totally wrong. It's totally false. It's totally misleading. Even CNN, of all places, had to admit that in the clip I showed earlier. So Donald Trump says, rather, in his campaign website, that the Second Amendment to our Constitution is clear. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon, period. The Second Amendment guarantees a fundamental right that belongs to all law-abiding Americans. Since the Constitution doesn't create that right, it ensures that the government can't take it away. Our Founding Fathers knew, and our Supreme Court has upheld, that the Second Amendment's purpose is to guarantee our right to defend ourselves and our families. This is about self-defense, plain and simple. So, amen. That's what Mr. Trump says. So I think the choice is clear here on the Second Amendment. And you can see it for yourself and see also how Mrs. Clinton tries to twist that, because she knows many, many Americans, the majority, do believe in the right to bear arms. And in fact, around, the statistic is varied, but, you know, people claim now that some 36 to high 40% of households have a weapon, a gun in the house. And it used to be, I guess, in the 70s around higher, around 50%. So this is an important right. And it's certainly important to have the right to defend yourself. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about the issues in this presidential race. Of course, today, also Mrs. Clinton, it was learned that the FBI is reopening her email investigation. We covered that in our first video, so if you didn't see that yet, please see it, how duplicitous she is about her emails, and also lied about that so many, many times, saying she didn't know they were classified. Right, yeah, and I have the London Bridge to sell you, as the famous saying goes. So, I'm Richard Urban. I'm reporting to you from historic Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. Do be blessed. Do vote on November 8th. And we'll see you for our next installment, number 4, of this series about the issues and the presidential candidates. Be blessed and good night.